Before we begin, if you're enjoying these park ranger horror stories, please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. It really helps us continue sharing these incredible and terrifying accounts from America's national parks. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from tonight. Now, let's get into this story from the Petrified Forest. My name is Frankie Mitchell, and I used to be a park ranger at Petrified Forest National Park in Arizona. I say used to be because what I'm about to tell you ended my career, my relationship with science, and very nearly ended my life. This happened in the fall of 1999, 25 years ago, but I still wake up some nights reaching for my hands, making sure they're still flesh and not stone. I came to the Petrified Forest with a PhD in geology, specializing in the Triassic period. Most people don't understand why someone would spend 7 years studying rocks that are 220 million years old, but for me, it made perfect sense. The Petrified Forest was a window into deep time, a place where you could literally touch the ancient past. Giant trees that had fallen during the age of dinosaurs now turned to rainbow-colored stone, scattered across the Arizona badlands like dropped toys from some cosmic giant. I'd been working at the park for 3 years, doing what I loved, leading tours, explaining the permineralization process to wide-eyed tourists, and spending my nights patrolling the backcountry areas where illegal fossil hunters still tried to steal pieces of our ancient heritage. The Park Service took theft seriously. There's a federal law against removing petrified wood from the park, and we enforced it strictly. But despite the warnings, despite the hefty fines, people still tried. We'd find empty spaces where logs had been, tire tracks in the desert, evidence of saws and chisels. My partner on night patrol was Mark Reeves, a 15-year veteran of the Park Service with a weathered face and a dry sense of humor. Mark had taught me everything about the practical side of rangering, the stuff they don't teach you in graduate school, how to track illegal campers, how to navigate the badlands at night, how to tell which pieces of wood were most likely to attract thieves. It was a Thursday night in late September when everything changed. The air was cool, the kind of desert night where you could see every star in the sky. Mark and I were doing our usual patrol of the Blue Mesa area, one of the most beautiful parts of the park, where the petrified logs lay scattered among hills of blue, purple, and gray bentonite clay. "Quiet night," Mark said, as we drove along the dirt access road, our headlights cutting through the darkness. "Too quiet," I joked, but there was something in the air that made me uneasy, a tension I couldn't explain. We stopped at one of our regular checkpoints, a cluster of particularly large petrified logs that thieves had targeted in the past. I got out of the truck with my flashlight, Mark following with the GPS unit we used to map and catalog any changes in the log positions. That's when I saw it. A new log, one that hadn't been there yesterday when I'd done the afternoon patrol. It was about 12 feet long, maybe 3 feet in diameter, lying in a small depression between two of the familiar logs. The wood was beautiful, striations of red, orange, and purple running through the stone, the kind of coloring you see in the finest specimens. But it shouldn't have been there. "Mark," I called out, "come look at this." He walked over, shining his light on the log. "Huh, that's new. I was here yesterday at 4 p.m. This wasn't here." "Maybe we just missed it before. These logs can blend in pretty well in certain light." I shook my head. "No. I walk this exact route every day. This is new." Mark knelt down, running his hand along the surface of the stone. "Well, it's definitely petrified, same composition as the others. But Frankie, this doesn't make sense. Petrified wood doesn't just appear. This is a 220-million-year-old fossil. It's been here since the Triassic." "I know what petrified wood is, Mark. I wrote my dissertation on it." I moved closer, examining the log more carefully. But look at the surface. It's too clean. No weathering, no erosion patterns. Most of these logs have been exposed to the elements for thousands of years. This one looks like it was just excavated. Maybe someone moved it here, trying to set up some kind of illegal sale or something. Who would move a 12-foot petrified log into the middle of the park? That's got to weigh 3,000 pounds. We spent the next hour documenting the log, taking photographs, measurements, GPS coordinates. Something about it bothered me, something I couldn't quite put into words. The stone felt wrong. Not the composition, but the presence of it. The next morning, I was back at the log with a core sampling kit. If this was a recently moved specimen, there might be evidence in the internal structure. I drilled carefully, extracting a thin cylinder of stone about 6 inches long. The sample showed the classic permineralization patterns, minerals filling the cellular structure of the original wood. Nothing unusual, except for one thing. As I examined the core sample under magnification back at the lab, I found organic material. Not fossil traces, but actual organic compounds. Fresh ones. Carbon-14 dating would be needed to be sure, but my initial analysis suggested this material was recent, as in days or weeks recent, which was impossible. I sent the sample to the USGS laboratory in Flagstaff, asking them to run a full spectral analysis. The results came back 3 days later, and when I read them, I had to sit down. The petrified wood was 220 million years old, exactly as expected for late Triassic specimens from the Chinle Formation, but embedded within the mineralized structure were traces of modern proteins, human proteins, and most disturbing of all, the mineralization process showed signs of being active. Not ancient. Active. The wood was still petrifying. I called an emergency meeting with the park superintendent and Mark. We gathered in the main office, the lab report spread out on the desk between us. "This has to be a contamination issue," the superintendent said, a nervous edge in his voice. "Someone touched the sample, left skin cells, something like that." "The proteins are embedded deep in the mineralized structure," I explained. "They couldn't have gotten there from surface contamination. They had to be there during the petrification process." "Frankie, that's not possible," Mark said. "Petrification takes millions of years. There's no mechanism for it to happen in days or weeks." "I know, but look at these electron microscope images." I pulled out the photos the lab had sent. "See these crystal formations? They're growing, actively growing. Whatever's in that log, it's not finished petrifying." The superintendent stood up, pacing. "Okay, let's assume for a moment this is real. What's the mechanism? How could something petrify in modern times?" "I don't know. But I want to take tissue samples from the area where we found the log. Soil, vegetation, anything organic. If there's an active petrification process happening, there might be other evidence." Mark volunteered to help with the sample collection. We went out that afternoon, equipped with sterile collection kits and protective gear. The protocol for handling potentially contaminated materials was strict, and we followed it to the letter. As Mark knelt down to collect a soil sample near the log, he stopped suddenly. "Frankie, my hand feels weird." "Weird how?" "Stiff, like the joints don't want to bend properly." He flexed his fingers and I heard a faint cracking sound. "When did it start?" "Just now. Probably just arthritis acting up. I'm not as young as I used to be." But over the next few hours as we collected samples, Mark's condition worsened. The stiffness spread from his fingers to his whole hand, then up his arm. He tried to laugh it off, but I could see the concern in his eyes. By evening, when we returned to the ranger station, Mark couldn't fully close his right hand. The skin on his fingers had taken on a grayish tone, and when he knocked his knuckles against the desk, they made a sound like stone on wood. "Mark, we need to get you to a hospital. It's probably nothing, some kind of allergic reaction. I'll take some antihistamines and it'll clear up." But I'd seen that grayish tone before. On the fresh, petrified log. On the samples that showed active mineralization, Mark was petrifying. I insisted on driving him to the emergency room in Holbrook, the nearest town with a hospital. The ER doctor was baffled. He'd never seen anything like it. X-rays showed mineral deposits forming in Mark's finger bones, spreading through the joints like crystalline cancer. "Is this some kind of industrial exposure?" the doctor asked. "What chemicals do you work with at the park?" "None that would cause this," I said. "We're park rangers, not miners." They admitted Mark overnight for observation and ran a battery of tests. I sat in the waiting room, my mind racing. If Mark was petrifying, if there was really an active process that could turn living tissue to stone, then that log hadn't appeared randomly. Someone, or something, had been petrified recently, within the last few weeks, and now Mark had been exposed to whatever caused it. I called the USGS lab explaining the situation, asking if there were any known compounds that could cause accelerated mineralization of organic tissue. The scientist I spoke with was skeptical but promised to look into it. In the meantime, I went back to the park to collect more samples. This time I wore full hazmat protection. The log was still there, exactly where we'd found it. But in the 3 days since our first visit, it had changed. The surface was more weathered now, the colors more faded. It looked more like the other ancient logs scattered around it, as if it was aging rapidly, catching up to its 220-million-year-old state. I took samples from the soil immediately around the log, from the vegetation, from the log itself. And that's when I found it. A boot print, pressed into the soft clay beside the log. Recent, maybe a few weeks old. And inside the boot print I found fragments of bone. Human bone. Partially mineralized. Someone had been standing here. And then they hadn't. I photographed everything, collected every sample I could find, and rushed back to the station. The lab results would take days, but I didn't have days. Mark's condition was deteriorating rapidly. By the second night in the hospital, the petrification had spread to his entire right arm. The skin was hard, gray, cracked in places like dried mud. When he tried to move his fingers, I could hear stone grinding against stone. "Frankie," he said, his voice strained. "Whatever this is, you need to stop it, not just for me. If this is contagious, if it can spread, I'm working on it, I promise." But I was terrified, because I'd seen the progression in the samples, the human proteins in the log, the bone fragments in the boot print, and now Mark. It was all connected, and it was accelerating. The third day, I received a call from the park superintendent. "Frankie, we've got a problem. 3 tourists just turned in petrified wood samples they took from the park. Said they felt guilty after reading the signs about the curse." The curse. You know, the old legend. Bad luck comes to anyone who takes rocks from the park. We've always dismissed it as superstition, a way to discourage theft. But these tourists, they all reported the same thing. Joint stiffness, skin discoloration. They're scared. The curse was real. Not superstition. Not bad luck. A real physical process that turned people to stone. I spent that night going through old park records, looking for any mention of similar cases. And I found them. Reports from the 1920s when the park was first established. Descriptions of workers who'd handled the petrified wood and developed strange symptoms. Stiffness, crystallization, eventual complete petrification. One report from 1923 described a geologist who'd become statue-like after spending a week excavating specimens. The report noted that he'd been buried in the park, his body too heavy to transport. There was a grave, somewhere in the park, a grave containing a fully petrified human being. And if I could find it, if I could study it, maybe I could understand the mechanism. Maybe I could save Mark. But I was running out of time. The hospital called with an update. Mark's petrification had reached his chest. His breathing was becoming labored as his rib cage slowly turned to stone. They were talking about transferring him to a research hospital in Phoenix, but they weren't sure his body could handle the transport. I had maybe 48 hours before Mark became a statue. I went back to the site of the fresh log one more time, searching the area in widening circles. If someone had been petrified here recently, there had to be more evidence, more remains. And then I found it. Not a grave, but a hole. A deep hole, maybe 10 feet across, descending into the earth at a sharp angle. The sides were smooth, glassy, as if the rock had been melted. And from deep below, I could feel warmth. Geothermal heat rising from somewhere far beneath the park. I shined my flashlight into the hole and saw them. Hundreds of them. Petrified logs, stacked vertically like pillars, descending into the depths. But these weren't lying horizontally like the ones on the surface. These were standing upright, like a forest frozen in stone. An underground forest. Still in place where the trees had originally grown, 220 million years ago. And deep below, barely visible in the darkness, something was glowing. A faint orange light, pulsing like a heartbeat. I knew then that the source of the petrification wasn't on the surface. It was down there, in the depths, where the ancient forest still existed in some impossible, living state. If I wanted to save Mark, I had to go down there. I had to descend into a 220 million year old forest that was somehow still alive, and pray I didn't become part of it. The next morning, I assembled climbing gear and called in a favor from a caving friend in Flagstaff. I didn't tell him what I'd found, just that I needed help exploring a newly discovered cave system in the park. He arrived that afternoon with ropes, harnesses, and enough equipment to descend safely. As we prepared to go down, my phone rang. The hospital. Mark's doctor. Miss Mitchell, I'm afraid Mark's condition has reached a critical stage. The petrification has spread to his internal organs. His heart is struggling to pump blood through increasingly mineralized arteries. We're doing everything we can, but how long does he have? Days, maybe less. I'm so sorry. I looked down into the hole, at the ancient forest waiting below, at the orange glow that might hold answers, or might hold death. Mark was counting on me, and I was about to descend into the earth, into deep time itself, hoping to find a cure hidden in stone and heat, and impossibly preserved life. The descent took 2 hours. The heat increased with every foot we dropped, and the air became thick, almost syrupy. My caving friend kept asking if we should turn back, but I pushed on. I had to see the source. At the bottom, we emerged into a vast cavern. And there it was, a living Triassic forest. The trees weren't petrified, they were alive. Green bark, rustling leaves, roots that disappeared into cracks in the glowing stone floor. Impossible. Against every law of geology, biology, physics. But real. And in the center of the forest, the largest tree I'd ever seen. Its trunk had to be 50 feet in diameter, its branches spreading across the entire cavern ceiling, and embedded in its bark, dozens of them, were human shapes. People turned to stone, being slowly absorbed into the tree, the fresh log on the surface. It had been a branch from this tree, a branch that had fallen, carrying with it the petrified remains of someone who'd gotten too close. And now I understood. The tree was still petrifying, still turning organic matter to stone, just like it had 220 million years ago. It was how it fed, how it preserved itself, how it had survived when everything else from its era had died. My friend grabbed my arm, pulling me back toward the rope. "We need to leave now." But I saw something that made me freeze. On the side of the great tree, a carving. Fresh, maybe a few months old. "Property of the U.S. Geological Survey, Specimen Alpha, do not disturb." Someone knew about this. The government knew, and they'd kept it secret. As we climbed back up, my mind raced. This wasn't a natural phenomenon. This was a contained, studied anomaly, which meant there might be research. Data. Maybe even a cure. When I reached the surface, I immediately called the USGS, demanding to speak to whoever was in charge of Specimen Alpha. After a long hold and multiple transfers, a woman's voice came on the line. "Miss Mitchell, we've been expecting your call. I understand you've discovered our project." "Your project is killing my partner. He's got maybe a day left before he's completely petrified." We're aware of Mr. Reeves' condition. We've been monitoring the situation. Unfortunately, once the process begins, there's no known cure. The mineralization is irreversible. Irreversible? You're telling me you've studied this thing for decades and never found a way to stop it? A pause. "Miss Mitchell, the tree doesn't just petrify organic matter. It preserves it, perfectly. Every cell, every molecule, captured in stone forever. From a scientific standpoint, it's the most important discovery in geological history. From a human standpoint, it's a death sentence. We can't destroy it. The tree may be the last living thing from the Triassic period. It's invaluable." I hung up. They weren't going to help. And Mark was out of time. The next morning, I went to the hospital to check on Mark. His condition had worsened overnight. The petrification had spread from his right arm across his shoulder and was creeping toward his neck. The doctors had no explanation, no treatment, no hope to offer. When I walked into his room, he was staring at his stone hand, flexing the fingers that barely moved anymore. "Frankie," he said quietly, "tell me the truth. How bad is this?" I pulled up a chair and sat down. "The petrification is accelerating. Based on the rate of spread, you have maybe 6 or 7 days before it reaches vital organs. 7 days to turn into a statue." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's not how I thought I'd go." "You're not going to go. I'm going to figure this out." "How?" "The government's been studying this thing for decades and they have no cure." "Because they don't want a cure. They want to preserve the tree, study it. But I don't care about their research. I care about you." Mark looked at me, and even with half his face still mobile, I could see the fear in his eyes. "What are you planning?" "I'm going back down to that cavern. I'm going to find out exactly what that tree is, how it works, and how to stop it. And if the government tries to stop you, then they better be ready for a fight." I left the hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. The clock was ticking. 7 days until Mark became a permanent addition to the Petrified Forest. 7 days to save him, and I was going to use every single one of them. Day 2 of Mark's petrification, and I could already see the progression accelerating. The stone had spread from his right shoulder down across his chest, creating a diagonal band of mineralized tissue that looked like a geological fault line running across his body. When he breathed, I could hear the grinding of stone against stone, a sound that made my teeth ache. The hospital had isolated him in a private room, partly for observation, partly because the other patients were terrified. Rumors were spreading faster than the petrification itself. A curse, a plague, divine punishment for disturbing sacred ground. I spent that morning in the park archives, digging through every old report, every incident log, every scrap of documentation from the park's early days. If there had been other cases, there would be records, and I found them. 1922. A surveyor named Jacob Matthews reported unusual stiffening after handling petrified specimens. Dismissed from service 2 weeks later. No further records. 1928. 3 workers from the Civilian Conservation Corps developed stone-like growths on their hands and arms. Transferred to an undisclosed medical facility. Never returned. 1934. Dr. Eleanor Vance, a paleontologist from Princeton, spent 6 weeks excavating in the park. Her final journal entry: "The stones are warm. The stones are alive. I can feel them singing." Found 3 months later, fully petrified, sitting at her excavation site. Body never recovered. Classified as geological anomaly. The pattern was clear. Every decade or so, someone would get too close to the source, handle the wrong specimen, and begin the transformation. And every time the government would step in, classify the case and make it disappear. But what was the mechanism? How did it spread? I took samples from the fresh log we'd found, from the soil around it, from the air itself. I needed to understand the vector. Bacteria? Fungal spores? Some kind of mineral aerosol? The USGS lab in Flagstaff called me that afternoon with preliminary results. "Dr. Mitchell, we've identified the agent. It's unlike anything we've seen before. Microscopic crystalline structures, almost like seeds, suspended in a silica matrix. When they come into contact with organic tissue, they trigger a cascade reaction. The body's own minerals, calcium, phosphorus, iron, they start to precipitate out of solution and form stone. How does it spread? Contact? Airborne? Both. The spores are released when petrified wood is disturbed, broken, or heated. They can remain dormant in the soil for decades, waiting for the right conditions. Can it be stopped? Neutralized?" A pause. "We're working on it. But Dr. Mitchell, this isn't a simple infection. This is a fundamental alteration of cellular structure. Even if we could kill the spores, the existing petrification wouldn't reverse." "I know. I just need to stop it from spreading further." That afternoon, 3 tourists came to the ranger station, all reporting the same symptoms Mark had shown. Stiffness, gray discoloration, joint pain. They'd all taken small pieces of petrified wood as souvenirs 2 days earlier, despite the prominent signs warning against it. The curse was real. The warnings weren't just Park Service propaganda or superstition. They were legitimate safety measures against an active geological hazard. I quarantined the tourists, called the hospital, and tried to explain to increasingly panicked park administrators that we had a containment situation. But how do you contain something that's been lying dormant in the ground for millions of years? How do you quarantine an entire national park? That night, I received a call from an unknown number. "Dr. Mitchell, this is Vince Winters. I heard you've been looking into my old research." "Dr. Winters, I need to know everything you can tell me about that tree. My partner has maybe 5 days left." "I know. I've been monitoring the situation. The government keeps tabs on me, makes sure I don't talk, but they can't stop me from watching. What do you want to know?" "How do I stop it? The petrification. There has to be a way. There's only one way. Destroy the source. That tree underground, it's actively producing spores. As long as it lives, the infection will spread. Cut it down, burn it, collapse the cavern. I don't care how, but it has to be eliminated." The government won't allow that. The government has been protecting that tree since 1965. They think it's the most important paleontological discovery in history, a living link to the Triassic period. They'll let 1,000 people turn to stone before they'll let you destroy it. Then I'll do it without their permission. Good. But Dr. Mitchell, you need to understand what you're up against. That tree isn't just ancient, it's intelligent. It survived for 220 million years by adapting. by defending itself. It won't go quietly. What do you mean, intelligent? The woman I told you about, the researcher who got trapped in the tree in the 70s. Before she was fully absorbed, she managed to communicate. She said the tree was aware, that it could sense threats, could direct its growth, could choose its victims. She said it was afraid. Afraid of what? Of dying, of being the last of its kind. It's been alone down there for millions of years, and it's desperate to survive. The petrification, the absorption of organic matter. It's not just feeding. It's trying to preserve life in the only way it knows how, by turning it to stone. I felt a chill run down my spine. So every person embedded in that tree, they're not dead. No, they're preserved, conscious, trapped in stone but still aware. The tree thinks it's saving them. It doesn't understand that from our perspective that's worse than death. After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of my office, trying to process what Winters had told me. The tree was alive, aware, and it had been collecting people for decades, maybe centuries, preserving them in its twisted version of immortality. I thought about Mark, lying in a hospital bed, slowly turning to stone. In 5 days, maybe less, he'd be like those others, trapped in his own body, conscious but immobile, feeling every moment of his existence stretched into eternity. I couldn't let that happen. The next morning I went back to the hole in the ground where I'd first seen the underground forest. I needed to survey the area, plan my approach, figure out how to access the tree without alerting the government. But when I arrived, the hole was gone, not filled in, not covered. Gone. The ground where it had been was smooth, undisturbed, as if the opening had never existed. I searched the area for an hour, using my GPS coordinates, my memory, everything I could think of. But the entrance to the cavern had disappeared. The government had sealed it. My phone rang. Director Hammond from the USGS. Dr. Mitchell, I understand you were looking for the access point to the underground formation. You sealed it. You knew I was planning to go back down. We've been monitoring your communications, including your call with Dr. Winters last night. We can't allow you to damage the specimen. That specimen is killing people. 3 tourists with minor symptoms that will likely resolve on their own, and 1 ranger who was careless with contaminated materials. That's an acceptable risk given the scientific value of the discovery. Acceptable risk? Mark is turning to stone. Mr. Reeves will be provided with the best care available. We're working on treatment options. You've been working on treatment options for 50 years, and you have nothing. You're letting people die to protect a tree. We're protecting the last living organism from the Triassic period. Surely you, as a scientist, can understand the importance of that. I understand that you've lost your perspective. That tree isn't more important than human lives. That's where we disagree. Good day, Dr. Mitchell. And please, don't attempt to access the formation again. We've placed sensors around the entire area. Any unauthorized entry will result in immediate arrest. She hung up. I stood there staring at the smooth ground where the hole had been, feeling helpless. They'd blocked my only access to the tree. Without it, I couldn't destroy the source. And without destroying the source, Mark would die. But I wasn't ready to give up yet. I spent that day driving around the park, studying the geology, looking for other potential access points. The Petrified Forest sits on the southern edge of the Colorado Plateau, a vast expanse of sedimentary rock layers that have been eroded over millions of years. If there was one hole leading to the underground cavern, there might be others. I found 3 possible sites, all of them narrow fissures in the rock, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. I marked them on my GPS and waited for nightfall. At midnight, I returned with climbing equipment and a thermal camera. The camera could detect heat signatures, and if the cavern was connected to a geothermal vent, there should be measurable heat escaping through any openings. The first two fissures showed nothing, but the third one, a crack in the rock hidden behind a small hill, registered a temperature differential. Warm air was rising from below. I'd found another way in. The descent took 3 hours. The fissure was tight, claustrophobic, forcing me to crawl on my stomach in places. But I kept going, driven by the knowledge that Mark's time was running out. According to the hospital's latest update, the petrification had reached his throat. He could barely speak. Maybe another 2 days before it reached his brain. At the bottom of the fissure, I emerged into a tunnel. Not the large cavern I'd seen before, but a narrow passage carved through layers of ancient rock. I followed it, my headlamp illuminating striations of red, purple, and gray, the geological history of the Triassic period written in stone. After what felt like hours, the tunnel opened up, and I found myself at the edge of the cavern. The living forest. It was even more magnificent than I remembered. Dozens of trees, their trunks massive, their bark a living green that glowed with bioluminescence. The air was thick and humid, filled with the smell of growing things, of life that had persisted against all odds. And in the center, the great tree. 50 feet in diameter, its branches spreading across the cavern ceiling like the arms of some ancient god, and embedded in its bark I could see them. Human shapes, dozens of them trapped in various stages of absorption. Some were recent, their features still recognizable. Others were older, their bodies almost completely merged with the wood, and as I watched, one of them moved. Just a twitch, a slight shift of the head, but enough to confirm what Winters had told me. They were alive, all of them, conscious, trapped. I approached the tree slowly, my hand on the explosive device I'd brought. It wasn't much, just enough to collapse the tunnel between the tree and the geothermal vent. Cut off its heat source, and the tree would die. But as I got closer, I felt it. A presence. An awareness turning its attention toward me. The tree knew I was there, and it was afraid. The tree didn't move. It couldn't move, rooted as it was to the floor of the cavern, its massive trunk anchored by roots that disappeared into cracks in the glowing stone. But I could feel it watching me, its awareness pressing against my mind like a physical weight. I'd never believed in psychic phenomena, in telepathy or spiritual communication. I was a scientist. I dealt in measurable phenomena, in data and evidence. But standing there in that ancient cavern, surrounded by bioluminescent trees that shouldn't exist, I couldn't deny what I was experiencing. The tree was communicating with me, not in words, not in images, but in feelings, in emotions so raw and primal they bypassed my rational mind entirely. Fear, loneliness, desperation. It had been alone for 220 million years. Every other tree from the Triassic period had died, had been buried, had turned to stone. But this one, through some impossible combination of geothermal heat and evolutionary adaptation, had survived. It had endured through the extinction events, through the rise and fall of the dinosaurs, through the ice ages and the shifting of continents. And now, it was the last. The final survivor of an entire era, the only living connection to a world that had vanished eons ago. I understood then why the government wanted to preserve it. This wasn't just a tree. This was a monument to survival itself, a testament to life's ability to endure against impossible odds. But understanding didn't change what I had to do. I pulled out the explosive device, a small-shaped charge designed to collapse the tunnel between the tree and the geothermal vent. Once the heat source was cut off, the tree would die. The spores would become inert. Mark would be saved. As I placed the charge at the base of the largest root, the tree's awareness intensified. The feeling of fear became overwhelming, and I saw something I didn't expect. The people embedded in the bark were moving. Not much, just slight shifts of position, but enough to see. They were trying to reach for me, trying to communicate. I approached one of them, a woman whose face was still partially visible through the stone and bark. Her eyes were open, tracking my movement. Her mouth was frozen in a silent scream that had lasted for who knows how many years. On her lab coat, barely visible beneath the encroaching wood, was a name tag, Dr. Eleanor Vance, the paleontologist from the 1934 report. She'd been here for 90 years. Trapped, aware. I wanted to turn away, to complete my mission and leave this place and never think about it again. But I owed her something. Acknowledgement. Witness. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I'm going to destroy the tree. It's going to kill you. All of you. But I can't let it keep doing this. I can't let it take more people." Her eyes shifted, looking at something behind me. I turned and saw him. Dr. Vince Winters climbing down through the fissure I'd used, moving with surprising agility for a man his age. "Dr. Winters? What are you doing here?" "Same thing you are." Finishing what should have been finished 50 years ago. He had a larger pack than mine, and from it he pulled industrial cutting tools and several containers of accelerant. "The government is monitoring everything. They'll know you're here." "Let them know. I'm 84 years old. What are they going to do? Put me in prison? I'll be dead before the trial's over." He moved to the tree, studying the embedded bodies. "I've been watching this thing consume people for half a century. I've kept silent because they told me it was important, that the scientific value outweighed the human cost. But I'm done. I'm done watching while people turn to stone. My explosive will collapse the tunnel. That should be enough. No, it won't. I've studied the geological surveys. This tree's root system extends for miles. There are multiple connections to geothermal activity. Cutting off one vent won't kill it. We need to destroy the tree itself, burn it out, make sure it's completely gone. That will kill everyone embedded in it. They're already dead, Dr. Mitchell. Or they wish they were. Look at them, really look. Do you think they want to stay like this? Conscious, but immobile, feeling every moment of every day for eternity? We're not killing them, we're releasing them." I looked at Dr. Vance again. Her eyes met mine, and I saw something in them. Not fear, not anger, relief. Winters was right. This wasn't murder. This was mercy. How long will it take? I've brought enough accelerant to ensure the fire burns hot enough to crack the stone around the tree's base. Once we ignite it, we have maybe 30 minutes to get out before the smoke and heat become lethal. Then let's do it. We worked quickly, placing accelerant around the base of the tree, soaking the bark, setting shaped charges in strategic locations to ensure maximum damage. The tree's awareness intensified with every action we took, the fear becoming almost unbearable. But I pushed through it. Mark had maybe 24 hours left. This had to work. As we prepared to ignite the accelerant, I heard voices from above. The government agents had found us. They were descending through the fissure, shouting orders, telling us to stop. "Light it now," Winters said, "before they can stop us." I hit the ignition switch. The accelerant caught immediately. Flames racing around the base of the tree, climbing up the trunk, spreading through the branches. The heat was instant and intense, driving us back. The embedded bodies began to crack, stone splitting away from flesh. The petrification reversing under the extreme temperature. For a brief moment, the people trapped in the tree were free. And then the flames consumed them, turning centuries of preserved life to ash in seconds. The tree itself began to burn, its ancient wood catching fire with surprising ease. The smoke filled the cavern quickly, thick and choking. Winters grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the fissure. "We have to go now." But as we ran, I heard it. A sound like nothing I'd ever experienced. The tree was screaming, not with voice, but with that same psychic pressure, broadcasting its pain and terror across every wavelength my mind could perceive. It knew it was dying, and it was afraid. We climbed through the fissure as fast as we could, the smoke following us, the heat making the rock too hot to touch. Behind us, I could hear explosions as the shaped charges detonated, collapsing sections of the cavern, burying the burning tree under tons of stone. We emerged into the cool night air just as government SUVs surrounded us. Agents rushed forward, pulling us away from the fissure as more explosions rumbled from below. Director Hammond was there, her face tight with rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done? That was the most important paleontological discovery in history." "That was a death trap," Winters replied, coughing smoke from his lungs. "And we just closed it. You'll be prosecuted for this, both of you. Federal destruction of protected resources, interfering with a government research project." "Save it," I said. "My partner is in a hospital turning to stone because of your protected resource. If destroying it saves him, I'd do it again." Hammond's phone rang. She answered, listened, and her expression changed. "The petrification, Mr. Reeves, it's stopped. The mineralization has ceased." I felt a wave of relief so intense I almost collapsed. "He's okay?" "Stable. The existing stone won't reverse, but it's no longer spreading." She looked at me, and for a moment I saw something other than anger. Maybe respect. Maybe understanding. "You saved him. And how many others?" Winters asked. "How many people didn't have someone willing to destroy that tree for them? How many died or worse were absorbed because you valued scientific discovery over human life?" Hammond had no answer to that. "They arrested us both, drove us to a federal facility, held us for questioning." But by morning, Winters had been released. He'd given a full confession, claiming sole responsibility for the destruction. The charges against me were dropped on the condition that I sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. I never practiced geology again. I couldn't. Every time I looked at a rock, I thought about that tree, about the people trapped inside it, about the choice between preservation and mercy. Mark recovered, more or less. The petrification that had already occurred was permanent, but he learned to live with it. Half his body was stone, but half was still flesh. He could walk, talk, even smile, though the smile was lopsided. Dr. Winters passed away 2 years later. Natural causes. The government never prosecuted him. I attended his funeral, and at his request I spoke about what we'd done. Not the classified parts, just the broader truth. Sometimes scientific discoveries aren't meant to be preserved. Sometimes the ethical choice is destruction. But I kept one secret. A week before Winters died, he called me. "Dr. Mitchell, I need to tell you something. Something I didn't tell the government." "What is it?" "The tree. We didn't destroy it completely. The root system was too extensive. I've been monitoring seismic activity in the area. There's still heat fluctuation, still geological anomalies. You think it survived? I think we wounded it, badly. But life finds a way, doesn't it? Especially life that's survived for 200 million years. What should we do? Nothing. We've bought time, maybe decades, maybe centuries. But eventually, it will grow back. And when it does, someone else will have to make the choice we made. I think about that sometimes. About the tree, buried deep beneath Arizona, slowly regenerating. slowly spreading its roots back toward the heat that sustains it, about the people who might encounter it in the future, who might feel that same psychic pull, that same awareness pressing against their minds. And I wonder if we made the right choice, if destroying something irreplaceable, something unique in all of Earth's history could ever really be justified. But then I think about Mark, alive and scarred, but alive. And I know that given the choice again, I'd do the exact same thing. Some discoveries are too dangerous to preserve. Some knowledge comes at too high a cost. And some things that survived extinction maybe didn't survive for a reason. The flames consumed the tree with the ferocity I didn't expect. Ancient wood, preserved for 220 million years, burned like it had been soaked in kerosene. The heat drove us back toward the fissure. Our faces scorched, our lungs filling with smoke that tasted of sulfur and time itself. Behind us, the embedded bodies were cracking free from the bark. For brief moments, I could see them clearly. Dr. Eleanor Vance, the paleontologist from 1934. The researcher from the 70s who'd screamed for 5 years. Dozens of others, their faces frozen in expressions of terror or relief or something in between. And then the flames took them, turning preserved flesh to ash in seconds. After 90 years of imprisonment, of consciousness trapped in stone, they were finally released. The tree's psychic scream intensified as we climbed. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was rage, betrayal. This organism had survived every extinction event, every catastrophe, every change the Earth had thrown at it for 220 million years. And now, 2 humans with explosives and accelerant were ending it in minutes. I felt almost guilty. Almost. Then I thought about Mark, lying in a hospital bed with stone spreading through his chest, and I climbed faster. We emerged from the fissure just as the shaped charges detonated below. The ground shook, and a plume of smoke and ash erupted from the opening, followed by a blast of heat that singed my eyebrows. Behind us, I could hear the cavern collapsing, millions of tons of rock burying the burning tree and everything it had collected. Government SUVs surrounded us immediately, agents rushing forward with weapons drawn. Director Hammond was there, her face twisted with fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she shouted over the rumble of collapsing rock. That was the most important paleontological discovery in human history. "That was a death trap," Winters replied, coughing smoke from his lungs. "And we just closed it permanently. You'll be prosecuted for this, both of you. Federal destruction of protected resources interfering with a classified research project, trespassing on restricted government property." Hammond's phone rang, cutting off her tirade. She answered, listened, and her expression changed from rage to something closer to shock. "What do you mean stopped?" she asked. Another pause. "Complete cessation? No further spread?" She looked at me, and I saw the moment she understood what had happened. "The tree. They killed the tree and the infection stopped." I felt my knees go weak. "Mark, he's okay?" "The hospital reports that Mr. Reeves' petrification ceased approximately 6 minutes ago, the exact moment of the explosion." She lowered her phone, studying me with a mixture of anger and reluctant respect. "The existing mineralization is permanent, but it's no longer spreading. Your partner is going to live." The relief hit me so hard I actually stumbled. Winters caught my arm, steadying me. "Told you destroying the source would work," he said quietly. Hammond ordered the agents to take us into custody. We were separated, driven to different facilities, held in different rooms. The questioning went on for hours. They wanted to know everything: how I'd found the alternate entrance, how Winters and I had coordinated, what we'd used to destroy the tree, whether we'd documented anything, taken samples, kept any evidence. I told them the truth, all of it. There was no point in lying now. Around midnight, they finally let me make a phone call. I called the hospital in Holbrook. "Mr. Reeves is resting comfortably," the nurse told me. "The doctors are amazed. Whatever was causing the condition, it just stopped. They've never seen anything like it. Can I speak to him?" "He's sedated right now, but I can give him a message when he wakes up." "Tell him Frankie says mission accomplished." I heard her smile through the phone. "I'll tell him." They kept me in custody for 3 more days. On the 4th day, Director Hammond arrived with a stack of papers. "Dr. Mitchell, you have 2 options. Option 1, we prosecute you for destruction of federal property, interference with a classified project, and about a dozen other charges. You spend the next 10 years in a federal prison. Option 2, you sign this non-disclosure agreement, you never speak about what happened, you resign from the Park Service, and this all goes away. What about Dr. Winters?" "Dr. Winters has given a full confession, claiming sole responsibility for the destruction. He's 84 years old and in poor health. We're not going to waste resources prosecuting him. He won't live long enough to see trial anyway. And the tourists, the 3 people who were infected? Their symptoms have ceased as well. We're monitoring them, but they appear to be recovering. The existing mineralization is minimal. They'll make full recoveries." I thought about Mark, about the permanent scars he'd carry for the rest of his life. Half his body turned to stone, immobile, a constant reminder of how close he'd come to becoming part of that tree's collection. If I sign this, what happens to the research? All those years of data about the tree? Classified, sealed. The cavern has been completely collapsed and filled with concrete. The site is now officially designated as geologically unstable and off-limits to all personnel, civilian and government alike. So you're burying it, literally and figuratively. We're protecting what remains and ensuring nothing like this happens again. That's the best outcome for everyone involved. I signed the papers. What choice did I have? Fighting them would accomplish nothing except ruining my life. And Mark needed me. He was going to need months, maybe years of rehabilitation to adapt to his new reality. They released me that afternoon. I drove straight to the hospital. Mark was sitting up in bed when I arrived, his right arm and part of his chest still stone, but his eyes clear and alert. When he saw me, his face split into a lopsided smile, the stone side of his face unable to move. "Hey there, troublemaker," he said, his voice rough but strong. "Heard you blew up a national treasure. A national threat. There's a difference." I sat down beside his bed, taking his left hand, the one that was still flesh and warm. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck made of rocks. But I'm alive, and according to the doctors, I'm going to stay that way." He looked down at his stone arm. "Though, I'm going to need to get used to this." "The petrification stopped. It won't spread anymore. I know, they told me. Frankie, you saved my life, you and that crazy old man. Dr. Winters. He's the real hero. He's been watching that tree kill people for 50 years. He finally had enough. Is he in trouble?" He confessed to everything, took all the blame, said I was just an innocent bystander who got caught up in his vendetta. That's not true. No, but it's the story we're going with. I signed an NDA. As far as the official record is concerned, there was a geological collapse in the park. You were injured during a routine survey, and that's the end of it. Mark was quiet for a moment, studying his stone hand. When he flexed his fingers, I could hear the grinding of stone against stone, like rocks in a tumbler. "What was it like?" he asked. "Down there, in the cavern. Was it as incredible as we imagined?" I thought about how to describe it. The living forest glowing with bioluminescence, the great tree 50 feet across, its branches spreading across the entire cavern ceiling. The embedded bodies conscious but immobile, trapped for decades or centuries. It was beautiful, I said finally, and terrible. The most amazing thing I've ever seen, and the most horrifying. A piece of the Triassic period, alive and preserved in conditions that shouldn't exist. But it was killing people, Mark. It had been killing people for a long time. Destroying it was the right choice. No regrets? Only one. That I didn't find it sooner. Maybe we could have saved more people. Mark squeezed my hand with his good one. You can't save everyone, Frankie, but you saved me. That's enough. I stayed with him through his recovery. The doctor said it would take months before he could walk properly again. Years before he fully adapted to having half his body turned to stone. The weight distribution was all wrong. His center of gravity had shifted. Simple tasks like standing up or sitting down required complete relearning. But Mark was determined. He worked harder at physical therapy than anyone I'd ever seen. 3 months after the incident, he could walk with a cane. 6 months after, he could walk unaided, though with a pronounced limp. A year after, he'd adapted so well that strangers often didn't notice the stone until they got close enough to see the texture of his skin. The Park Service medically retired him with full benefits. The official story was a rare degenerative condition that had struck during routine field work. They gave him a ceremony, a plaque, and a generous pension. No mention of petrification, no mention of ancient trees or government conspiracies. I resigned from the Park Service 2 months after the incident. I couldn't stay. Every time I looked at a piece of petrified wood, I saw the tree. Every time I walked through the park, I felt the weight of what we'd destroyed. Dr. Winters called me occasionally over the next 2 years. We never spoke about the tree directly, always assuming our calls were monitored, but we developed a code. He'd ask about my rock garden, and I'd know he was talking about the site. I'd tell him it was quiet and dormant, and he'd understand that there were no new incidents. In the spring of 2002, Winters called with news that wasn't in code. Frankie, I don't have much time left. Cancer. The doctors say weeks, maybe a month. I wanted to call you before. I'm so sorry. Don't be. I'm 86 years old. I've lived a long life, most of it pretty good. But there's something I need to tell you. Something I couldn't say before. What is it? The tree. We didn't destroy it completely. The root system was too extensive. I've been monitoring seismic activity in the area. There's still heat fluctuation, still geological anomalies consistent with active geothermal venting. I felt my stomach drop. You think it survived? I think we wounded it badly, burned away the main trunk, collapsed the cavern, cut it off from most of its heat sources. But roots are resilient, Frankie. Especially roots that have survived for 220 million years. It'll take decades, maybe centuries, but eventually it will regrow. What should we do? Nothing. We've bought time. Maybe enough time for humanity to develop better ways to deal with it. Maybe enough time for the government to actually study it safely, instead of just protecting it. But eventually, someone else will have to make the choice we made, and I hope they have the courage to make it. Why didn't you tell the government this? Because they'd just seal it up tighter, classify it deeper, and wait for it to regrow so they could study it again. I'm telling you because you understand, you know the cost, and someday, when it comes back, someone needs to know the truth. Dr. Vince Winters died 3 weeks later. I attended his funeral in a small church in Flagstaff. There were maybe 20 people there, mostly former colleagues and a few family members. The eulogy talked about his contributions to paleontology, his pioneering work in the Petrified Forest, his dedication to science. No one mentioned that he'd destroyed the most important paleontological discovery in history. After the service, an old colleague of his approached me. "You're Dr. Mitchell, aren't you? The one who was with him at the end." I was one of his friends, yes. "He left something for you, asked me to give it to you after he passed." The man handed me a small wooden box, old and worn. Inside was a piece of petrified wood, no bigger than my palm, with colors ranging from deep red to orange to purple. It was beautiful, the kind of specimen that museums would pay thousands for. Attached to it was a note in Winter's handwriting. "Dr. Mitchell. This is from the tree, collected before we destroyed it. A reminder that some discoveries are too dangerous to preserve, and some knowledge comes at too high a cost. Use it to teach your students about the ethics of science, about the responsibility that comes with discovery. And remember, the Earth keeps its secrets for a reason. We violated one of those secrets. We paid the price. But we also saved lives. Was it worth it? That's for you to decide. T.W." I kept that piece of wood. Still have it, actually. It sits on my desk at the community college where I teach geology now. My students ask about it sometimes, and I tell them it's from the Petrified Forest National Park, from the late Triassic period, 220 million years old. I don't tell them about the living tree, or the government project, or the people embedded in bark for decades. I don't tell them about Mark or Winters or the choice between preservation and mercy. But I do teach them about ethics, about how scientific discovery comes with responsibility, about how sometimes the most important question isn't, "Can we study this?" but "Should we?" Mark visits sometimes. He's adapted to his stone body remarkably well. He hikes, bikes, even does some rock climbing, though he jokes that he has an unfair advantage being part rock himself. We never talk about what happened. We don't need to. The stone in his body is reminder enough. 20 years have passed since that night in the cavern. 20 years since we burned a 220 million year old tree and buried it under tons of rock and concrete. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in my office, I pick up that piece of petrified wood that Winters gave me. And I swear I can feel warmth coming from it. A faint pulse, like a heartbeat, trapped in stone. I tell myself it's just my imagination, that it's just residual heat from my hand, or a trick of the light, or my mind playing tricks after too many late nights grading papers. But I know better. Life finds a way, especially life that has survived for 220 million years. The tree is down there somewhere beneath Arizona, slowly regenerating, slowly spreading its roots back toward the heat that sustains it, slowly preparing to emerge again. Winters bought us time, maybe decades, maybe centuries, but eventually it will come back. And when it does, someone else will have to make the choice we made. Someone else will have to decide whether a unique scientific discovery is worth human lives. I hope they choose wisely. I hope they choose quickly. And I hope they have the courage to destroy something irreplaceable if that's what it takes to save someone they love. Because in the end, that's what it came down to. Not science versus ethics. Not discovery versus safety. Not past versus present. It came down to a simple question. Was Mark's life worth more than a 220 million year old tree? I answered yes. So did Winters. And if you'd asked us to make that choice again, even knowing what we'd destroy, even knowing what we'd lose, we'd answer the same way. Every time. Because some things are worth more than knowledge. Some people are worth more than discovery. And some choices, no matter how hard, are the only choices you can make. I look at the piece of petrified wood on my desk, feeling that impossible warmth. "Not yet," I whisper to it. Not in my lifetime. Give us more time. And for now, the warmth fades. For now, the tree sleeps. But I know it's listening, and I know someday, someone else will have to face what we faced. I just hope they're ready.